20 liters of gasoline per person, a ban on canisters, and sales only with coupons. There is a fuel crisis in occupied Crimea. At most gas stations on the peninsula, the scarce 92 and 95 octane gasoline have completely disappeared. And at the remaining gas stations, there are kilometer-long lines. The occupation authorities call these temporary measures, but the reality is much harsher. Due to successful attacks by Ukrainian drones, supplying fuel via the land bridge through Mariupol and Melitopol has become deadly dangerous. In addition, over the past 2 months, Russia has lost 20% of its diesel production due to strikes on oil refineries. Does the peninsula have any chance of breaking the blockade before the start of the tourist season? Watch the report by Alexander Muzhinchuk.
In Sevastopol, gasoline is now being sold with ration cards. In recent days, there has been a limit of 20 liters of fuel per person in Crimea. A ban on selling gasoline in canisters is also being introduced. But this does not solve the problem, because there is neither 95 nor 92 available in most of the peninsula.
If the gasoline runs out completely or so oil, I'll park my car and walk.
The situation with fuel, as you can see behind me. Tourists, come with your own cars. We will be happy to welcome you. But we have no way of knowing what you'll be driving back home on. Just come with your own cars.
Across the peninsula, there are mile-long lines for fuel. However, locals in Crimea say waiting is pointless unless you're holding fuel coupons that businesses purchased for their own needs.
For 11 hours, there has been no gasoline, not even a hint of it. In general, everyone is waiting, coming, looking, asking. The poor gas station attendant is tired of answering the same question to everyone. But there's no gasoline. There's nothing at all. So dear friends, I've realized one thing. You need to have 3 cars in life. All right, 2. One runs on gasoline, the other is electric. It's even better if you have a hybrid.
Diesel is running out too. Reuters reports that over the past 2 months, Russia has lost about a fifth of its total diesel fuel production due to Ukrainian strikes.
Based on the latest data from Reuters calculations, oil refineries that were damaged by drone strikes reduced diesel fuel production by 1 million tons in April and by another 600,000 tons in May.
And all this is happening practically right before the start of the tourist season in Crimea, for which, according to Russian propaganda, the peninsula is fully prepared.
Regarding Crimea's fuel situation, entering Kerch, gasoline is still available, with some left toward the southern coast. Coming from Krasnoperekopsk, past Jankoy, there is no gas left, no 92 or 95 octane, only diesel fuel, and at some stations nothing is available. So keep this in mind when traveling to Crimea. Although what is there to keep in mind? You won't have enough for the way back. So for those who have trips planned, it's better to reconsider your plans because you really might drive there by car and have to walk back.
The introduction of gasoline ration coupons in Crimea has become one of the biggest such cases since the late Soviet Union. The Kremlin-appointed Gauleiters call this a temporary measure. They claim it is needed so that the authorities can replenish fuel supplies at gas stations. The so-called head of the region, Sergei Aksyonov, who 6 months ago promised not to allow a fuel shortage on the peninsula, is now begging Crimeans not to stock up on gasoline. However, no one is listening to him.
I filled up my tank and now I'm driving around. If I suddenly find an opportunity to refuel somewhere, of course I'll fill up just in case.
A list of gas stations with fuel is on the Crimean Ministry of Fuel and Energy website. It lists 148 gas stations across Crimea. At most of them, gasoline is sold by coupons.
Right now, my neighbor came to my rescue by giving me 20 liters of gasoline, so I could resolve my problems. Well, we hope and are waiting for our authorities to resolve and settle this issue as soon as possible because gasoline is needed and important.
The fuel crisis in Crimea began after Ukrainian drone strikes restricted movement on the land bridge to Crimea. The so-called Pride of the Kremlin, the Novorossiya highway along the Sea of Azov through regions occupied in 2022, was considered one of the main routes for supplying fuel to Crimea. Now, traveling along this land corridor from Rostov-on-Don, especially for the occupiers' military vehicles and fuel trucks, is extremely dangerous.
Oh, it landed right here.
Drones are also remotely mining the highway that connects Crimea with the Rostov region. Drones drop explosive devices onto the road, which are triggered when movement is detected. According to calculations by French analyst Clément Moulin, at least 1,500 trucks have been turned into scrap metal on the so-called Novorossiya highway. and these are only the cases he was able to verify. In reality, the number of destroyed vehicles could be several times higher. Crimean Gauleiters strongly advise drivers to limit their trips and to choose this route only in cases of urgent necessity.
Look what the drone has done, damn!
According to the new rules set by the occupation authorities, convoys of vehicles must move mainly at night and during bad weather. Every third vehicle must be equipped with a UAV detector. The expansion of the Ukrainian kill zone onto the highway along the Sea of Azov is called by the occupiers both an illusion of a blockade and at the same time compared to the blockade of Leningrad. While Russian television only shows nothing but victories, social media is increasingly inundated with jokes about the safety of making the journey through the occupied territories.
Russians are asking what to take with you to Crimea via the Novorossiya route. Our answer: take gasoline in canisters, a bulletproof vest, helmet, fire extinguisher, electronic warfare devices, and anti-drone gear for your vehicle. And don't forget to write your will.
Gasoline is also transported to Crimea by ferries across the Kerch Strait, but the operation of the ferry depends on weather conditions. Since 2022, fuel has not been transported across the Crimean Bridge at all for safety reasons. Oleksandr Muzhenchuk, Podrobnosti, Inter TV channel, United News Marathon.
I will continue discussing the situation on the occupied peninsula and in the Black Sea with Dmytro Pletenchuk, spokesperson for the Naval Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Mr. Dmytro, welcome. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes. Hi, Irina, the studio and viewers.
First, regarding operational updates, how is the Russian fleet in the Black Sea? Is there an airstrike threat from the ships?
Well, the absence of their presence has already become a constant situation. It could probably already be called the hallmark of the so-called Russian Federation's Black Sea Fleet, and in fact, that's a good thing. But let me remind you, this didn't happen by chance, but as a result of the work of Ukraine's defense forces and the Navy in particular. As for the naval vessels that serve as carriers for long-range cruise missiles, they continue to remain stationed at their naval bases. Of course, we constantly consider this potential threat to be present, because in principle, over the course of the past month, they did use them once. And basically, they periodically prepare for such uses. But we are closely monitoring these current developments as well.
The Russian fleet in the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov has been effectively neutralized. This is a maritime battlefield where the defense forces have completely seized the initiative. This is what you are talking about and what Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrskyi mentioned during his recent visit to Odessa. I suggest we elaborate on this conclusion based on the results of May. So, in your opinion, what are the main objectives that have been achieved? What targets have the defense forces struck?
Well, if we look back, we can take, for example, what happened just last night. Similarly, a series of significant events took place in Crimea that are commonly referred to by the term cotton in our information space. These events are also happening according to plan. Well, as we can see, the comprehensive list of strategic targets is steadily and systematically being addressed accordingly. And once again, a wide variety of different components of the defense forces of Ukraine are actively and directly involved in this process. At the same time, venturing out into the open waters of the sea and not to mention acting freely, basically even carrying out their main tasks at the moment, the representatives of the so-called Russian Federation's Black Sea Fleet are essentially completely unprepared and not in a position to act. For this, they mostly use aviation, but that's more about defense now. So yes, here the strategic initiative and momentum remains firmly on our side. And of course, that's important. But serious threats still remain, nevertheless, in the form of hostile drones, which again, just last night, came in from the sea direction. Unfortunately, that persistent threat is still very much present. However, that's already a slightly different story.
And we'll talk about a slightly different story, which also affects the front, because gasoline, fuel, these are what the Russian army runs on. Crimea without fuel, gasoline rationed. All of this is thanks to the logistical lockdown announced by Mikhailo Fedorov, the Minister of Defense. This is a kind of drone control over highways in the temporarily occupied territories deep in the enemy's rear. Looking at the Taganrog-Jankoy highway, you could say that right now it's completely devoid of any fuel trucks. What exactly was it that made this possible? And in your opinion, how long do you think it will stay empty?
This is what I have consistently emphasized and mentioned multiple times on air before, that the Russians are now placing the primary logistical burden on the strategic land corridor. which they specifically named as one of the key goals of their so-called special military operation. However, it has a significant and major strategic drawback, its extreme proximity, especially when compared to other logistical routes to the actual line of combat engagement. Accordingly, at some point, they were inevitably bound to start getting hit there. Well, finally, that long-awaited moment has finally arrived. And yes, this will be a problem for the Russians, but for the most part, it will be a problem for ordinary Russians, right? This message is for unauthorized travelers and visitors who are planning to visit Ukrainian Crimea, or directly for those individuals who are permanently residing in Crimea, because as we have seen, logistics like these are highly vulnerable, and such logistics are exposed to risks. At the same time, I am sure that the military will continue to transport goods despite the losses. This is also normal practice for Russians. At some point in their journey, they just have to come to the stark realization that the total percentage of heavy fuel trucks that don't actually make it through is significantly higher than the number of those that actually do. That's when they'll start to feel it. But yes, ordinary residents of Crimea, as well as the not-so-ordinary ones who, as they often say in Russia, came from elsewhere, are already starting to feel the weight of these significant problems. They are even beginning to post about their experiences openly online, which is actually quite a risky and potentially dangerous thing to do while living on Russian territory today.
Are the Russians trying to activate their air defense systems because of this and unblock the land supply corridor?
The reality of the matter is it takes a significantly long period of time to respond to new threats, right? To new challenges. That is exactly how it has always functioned in the past. These are the unavoidable realities of any modern war. And when you finally manage to find such a strategic key that can open up certain significant opportunities, your enemy needs a certain amount of time to find a way to neutralize it effectively. And the significant threat that we have successfully created for the Russians, particularly on this critical logistical supply route from Rostov to Jankoy, will be very difficult for them to neutralize. This is because this specific tool is quite broad in scope. It is remarkably mobile, and there is no centralized system that, once struck, would completely eliminate the entire problem. No. So yes, right now they are facing a serious challenge, and I am not sure that over at least this summer they will be able to somehow really influence this situation in any significant way.
Mr. Dmytro, but they do have the Kerch Bridge, which they call the Crimean Bridge, as an alternative. Why isn't it being used for transportation, particularly for fuel?
It is my belief that we will eventually see this moment. We have also discussed this repeatedly on air, that at a certain critical juncture, when they are really pushed into a corner, they will probably be inevitably compelled to start transporting highly dangerous cargo across the bridge. There are currently significant restrictions, quite serious ones, both regarding fuel and lubricants, as well as certain types of cargo, and also for rail transport, both from a security standpoint, and because of the damage that the so-called Crimean Bridge has previously sustained. But when they really have absolutely nothing left to refuel with, when their reserves of military equipment are completely depleted and exhausted, they will be inevitably forced to use this logistics route as well. Furthermore, in addition to this, as of right now, ferry transportation is once again completely out of the question for them, due to the significant damage or total destruction of the railway ferries. Regular ferries cannot handle cargo volumes of this scale, and the railway ferries are currently out of operation.
Mr. Dmytro, you probably know and have already noticed over the past few years that when the Russians deploy their special UAV operator units like Rubicon and Judgment Day on land, on the front lines, it means that this is a strategic direction for them. And now, the Institute for the Study of War, citing partisans from the Atesh movement, has reported that the Russian command is being forced to redeploy UAV and electronic warfare operators from the front lines in the east to protect the Crimea-Rostov highway. First of all, do you record, and is it even possible to record such redeployments? And how do you think, does this mean that it is important for them? How much will this affect the front? That is, will it make things easier for our defenders?
We must not forget that this route is not just about supplying Crimea and the military forces stationed there. It's also about supplying the military groups in the southern region. That is the occupied Kherson region and Zaporizhzhia. So basically, traveling along this highway, you can clearly observe all the different military groups that are supplied by this connection. By the way, there's also a railway there, but it too periodically receives some fiery greetings from above. Well, I'm sure that those working on our side will immediately notice any changes in the situation. And once again, it will be exceptionally difficult and complex, because here we are talking about a defense strategy that needs to be systematic and thoroughly organized. Furthermore, this specific route is extremely long and difficult to monitor. You will find that you simply get exhausted from the constant process of searching the entire contact line for operators who work on it. So yes, in the end, it will be a very difficult and taxing endeavor.
And Odessa? That means the threat still exists. We have a little over a minute. Tell me how much you're getting stronger, without going into details, of course, but still. And what scenarios are you considering for a possible Russian offensive?
Well, as for fortification, these are routine measures. Right now, there's no emergency. Yes, they are being carried out, basically, taking into account the probabilities and possibilities. Our main problem right now, of course, is the use of kamikaze drones by the Russians, with which they are terrorizing the Odessa region. The situation is a bit easier now with ballistic missile attacks. They haven't used them for a while. But as for the unmanned aerial drones, yes, just last night we were once again defending ourselves with all of Odessa working together. The naval forces in particular have also shot some down themselves. And this, in fact, is the main problem we face. And now they are making very intense efforts to strike both vital port facilities and infrastructure, as well as critical civilian infrastructure. This is currently our main challenge and what we are fighting against.
Half a minute. What advice would you give to viewers who are heading to the beaches today and have decided to go for a swim in the sea anyway?
First and foremost, follow safety measures. If you see something unfamiliar or something that looks strange, immediately leave the area and get as far away as possible. If it is an anti-ship mine, maintain a distance of at least a full kilometer away. And accordingly call any emergency service, whether it's 101 or 102, it doesn't matter, we will come anyway. It should not be forgotten that in half of the cases, these mines detonate on their own before anyone arrives.
Thank you very much for this advice. At 9 o'clock, as is our tradition, we honor our fallen defenders. We were joined by Dmytro Pletenchuk, spokesperson for the naval forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine.